The latest devices by OnePlus are finally here, and they put a lot of work into making sure these phones give you the speed you need. In this video, I want to talk about my top 5 favorite features, and spoiler alert, I might be more impressed with this OnePlus phone than I have been in quite some time. It's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? These are my top 5 features of the OnePlus 8 Pro. Before we get started, a couple of things. I am talking about my top 5 favorite features of this phone in this video, but if you want to see the other side of the coin, I am going to talk about my top 5 complaints tomorrow in my next video. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can keep up with when that video comes out. And then after that, obviously, there is also the OnePlus 8, the smaller version, the non-Pro edition, which if you want to see content on that phone, make sure you let me know that in the comments down below. But you will still hear mentions of that phone when applicable in these top 5 videos. Which leads me to the first favorite feature of the OnePlus 8 Pro, the design. I was a little bit surprised when I unboxed this phone, and it had this lovely looking color on the back, this frosted look, which is called glacial green on the box, but when you shine it in the light, it's got more of an ocean blue look to it. Either way, it looks really awesome. The other thing that surprised me is just how easy the phone is to handle. Despite a lot of smartphones, high-end smartphones, getting bigger and bigger to accommodate larger displays, the OnePlus 8 Pro manages to have a larger display without actually blowing up its footprint. This is a 6.78-inch display, and there are curves on it to accommodate a bigger screen-to-body ratio and also keep the footprint a little bit more narrow, which is really good, especially for one-handed usage. There's also a curve on the back, which also helps with the handling. And it's at that point that I was also surprised by the fact that this phone is actually really thin. You still get key OnePlus features despite this thin frame, including the alert slider, which changes the ring modes to silent, ring, or vibrate. Special mention here to the included plastic case. That's a little bit more like a skin because it actually doesn't add any girth to the phone. I mean, OnePlus probably wanted to really drive home the fact that their phone is surprisingly thin, but they added a little bit of that trademark flair by putting the Never Settle on this included case. That is something I've never seen done before in an included accessory like this. But then there's also the smaller OnePlus 8, which is even easier to handle because of its slightly smaller display at 6.55 inches. Now, this phone already kind of stole my heart because it's easy to use in one hand, but it also has what might be the most unique color in the OnePlus 8 line, the Interstellar Glow. This reflective sheen is something we've seen in maybe one or two other smartphones, but it's great to see OnePlus put it in the phone that might be most available even on carriers across the US. If you want to have the higher specifications, obviously the Pro model is the one to go for. But if you are looking for just an easy, accessible, everyday experience, the OnePlus 8 is available too, and it's nice to see both of them made available in many markets. But the OnePlus 8 Pro is the one that brings what they call the speed you need, and most of it has to do with this awesome display. We've seen many smartphones attempt to have those high-end specifications that you would want out of a really top-tier display. Things like Quad HD resolution and high refresh rates, but in the OnePlus 8 Pro, you get both at the same damn time. And ultimately, a really good display is what makes a smartphone look more like a futuristic piece of tech. The 120Hz makes Oxygen OS smoothly glide across the screen, and as you get into your games and your media applications, you can really see that refresh rate helping. There's even a mode in the display settings that allows for the phone to render out media in such a way that takes advantage of the 120Hz. It's similar to what you might see in high-end TVs, and it's a setting that most people have on and other people turn off, but ultimately, this phone is trying to make it so that you really do enjoy the 120Hz as often as possible. Now, this display might slightly dwarf that of the OnePlus 8, but even if the OnePlus 8 has a 1080p display, it still has 90Hz in its refresh rate, which puts it a little bit above many of its competitors. But there are plenty of other settings on here to take advantage of this lovely display. I already talked about the motion smoothing for the high refresh rate, but there is also another thing here that I have enjoyed from many OnePlus devices over the last couple of years, the reading mode. A lot of us might be working from home right now, and reading is going to end up being a very common pastime. And OnePlus devices for the last number of years have actually been a great analog to ebook readers. That's because it can make the display a monochromatic display so that it's easier on the eyes and makes it seem like you're actually reading something off of like a Kindle. This can be done on a per-app basis as well, and another thing that I thought was cool about the reading mode this time was that you can actually block the heads-up peak displays of your notifications when they come in. That way nothing interrupts you during your reading flow. Of course, a really good display is only as good as the performance specs that power it, and the OnePlus 8 Pro has plenty to boast. It has a Snapdragon 865 and many different configurations of RAM and onboard storage so that you have a lot of multitasking capabilities and plenty of storage for things like the 4K video coming out of those cameras, which we'll get to later. I've already played a bunch of games on the OnePlus 8 Pro, and I've even done stuff like enjoy the screen using PS Play, where I play remote play from my PS4 for games like Persona 5 Royal and of course Final Fantasy VII Remake. But for straight mobile gaming, you will not want for performance whatsoever, especially once you get into the game space, because the gaming mode is available to really boost the performance. And then you can even take it up to 11 with the Fanatic mode. This is something we've seen in previous OnePlus devices, but the Fanatic mode is always a nice thing to see when you just want to hone in on your game, turn off all notifications, and you want all the performance to hit the high mark. And that's why the leaps forward in display technology are so awesome, and why it's so great on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Because you can have all the power in the world underneath the surface, but that screen should be able to show you and make you feel that power. And that's exactly what a Quad HD 120Hz display manages to do. Not to mention the OnePlus 8 and the OnePlus 8 Pro are all 5G capable, putting them right in line with the high-end phones you'll see on carriers across the US. My 5G in this particular area is a little bit spotty, but I have enjoyed it on T-Mobile using the OnePlus 8 Pro. But the OnePlus 8 will be available on T-Mobile with sub-6 5G, while it will also be available on Verizon on sub-6 and also millimeter wave. So you have a lot of choice here, and you'll be able to enjoy the future of our mobile internet using any one of OnePlus's newest devices. Now, the next enhancement OnePlus had to focus on is the cameras, because everyone has been going nuts on their cameras and OnePlus didn't want to be left behind. While you're not going to be seeing the super high megapixel counts or the really far zoom levels, what you are getting here is a package that is going to work perfectly for everyday usage, and it's still super high quality. OnePlus put in a little bit of their signature extra thought as well. The main sensor is a 48 megapixel shooter. And OnePlus enhanced their multi-frame processing to make sure that photos still come out even in situations that might not be ideal. But then the wide-angle camera, and you know I love wide-angle lenses, is a 48 megapixel shooter as well. As a matter of fact, it is the same sensor that was found as the main sensor in last year's offerings. In both of these lenses, you can trigger a 48 megapixel full resolution shot. And that's pretty awesome because a 48 megapixel sensor will allow the wide-angle shots to have high detail. Quite a bit of data to work with there. There is a telephoto lens here at 8 megapixels, but together the hybrid zoom allows you to get a default 3 times zoom, which still gives you really good quality results. The final camera here is the color filter camera, which is to say that the dedicated lens takes care of the built-in filters in the camera app without using up any precious software processing power. Which sounds pretty good in general, but if you're not going to use filters, then maybe this is not going to be a lens you ultimately use. I'll probably talk a little bit more about that in my top 5 complaints video. But overall, I've already used this phone for a little while now, taking pictures around my house and just getting videos of what I can, and I'm already really enjoying the results. The 48 megapixel wide-angle camera is already a wonderful addition, but then when I go into the video settings, one of the main video resolutions is a Cinema 4K at 30 and 60 frames per second, which is great. There are also plenty of other modes, including the night mode and a time-lapse mode, which doesn't give you a whole lot of control over how the time-lapse is calculated, but of course I can just speed it up in post and get the effect that I want. And ultimately, the fact that the wide-angle camera is a high-powered 48 megapixel sensor as well means that it can be used in many of the extra modes, like portrait mode for example. And you can use the two 48 megapixel sensors for macro modes as well. Overall, the cameras of the OnePlus 8 Pro are just solid, and even if they're not super overachieving compared to other phones, it doesn't mean that they're not good quality. And for many people out there who are just looking for a really reliable everyday camera package, the OnePlus 8 Pro really does provide that. And speaking of what this phone provides, OnePlus finally gave us a feature we've been wanting for a while, and that is wireless charging. Now, OnePlus has never been into wireless charging for any of their phones, but as you saw in a couple of articles leading up to today's announcement, it was because they wanted to make it as fast as possible before adding it to their flagship phone. Meet the Warp Charge 30 wireless charger. 30-watt wireless charging is unheard of, and it is possible using this phone. It'll only take maybe about an hour to get most of your battery back, and even then, if you just have it on that charger for most of your day while you're working at your desk, it's going to be charged up at full all the time, no matter what. There are a couple of features of this as well. There is a fan inside of this. After all, it is a 30-watt wireless charger, but then you can turn on what is called a bedtime mode so that the phone knows to tell the charger to quiet it down a little bit, because that fan, while it's not all that annoying, it is something that you could hear in a slight hum while trying to sleep. And the other thing I love is the angle of the wireless charger. It makes it so that the phone can still be quite usable, especially with the fast face unlock, so that you can still get to your phone and all of its content even when it is charging on the dock. Obviously, Warp Charge 30T is also available if you want to plug it in using the included charger, but with a wireless charger like this, you could just have it sitting there and not really have to worry about it at all. Not that you would really need to, because the 4510 mAh battery in here does still do a pretty good job of getting this thing to go the distance. I actually used this phone, granted on my Wi-Fi networks, for an entire day and was able to get almost 7 hours of screen on time, which is still impressive for a phone that has this high a spec. Because things like a 120Hz refresh rate Quad HD display, a Snapdragon 865, the Fanatic mode in the game space, which I was using quite a bit that day, I would expect the battery to drain faster than it did, but I got to the end of the day and I had plenty of screen on time despite all that I was doing, so color me impressed, and that's exactly the story that I have with the OnePlus 8 Pro thus far. Availability was close to being one of my favorite features of this phone because this might be the first time that we've actually had the Pro and the regular version of the phone available in the same markets. That is the case here, though let me just tell you that the OnePlus 8 Pro will be online at oneplus.com and also on Amazon, making it pretty easy to get, and you can find it at $899 or $999 depending on your configuration. The OnePlus 8 will also be found online for a price as low as $699 depending on your configuration, but it also is the phone that will be available on T-Mobile and Verizon and 5G capable for those particular 5G networks. Look forward to my top 5 complaints video coming tomorrow so you can see the other side of the story with the OnePlus 8 Pro. And together, that will give you many of my thoughts, pretty much all of my thoughts about this phone ahead of my final video review. But from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching. Drop some likes on this video, get into the comment sections and tell me what you think about the OnePlus 8 and the OnePlus 8 Pro. And until my next video, I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.